I'll start by introducing one of the key reference points which underpins my clinical work. Renus Papadopoulos suggests that there are two Jungs, the one with an open epistemology and Socratic ignorance, who was constructionist and relational, and the other who, following Gnostic epistemology, was in fact essentialist and universalist. I'm interested in the elements of Jung's work which are most epistemologically open and therefore most conducive to learning from a nuanced learning from the most impoverished and mad parts of my patients. In other words, they're Okay, I'll run slightly over time, I warn you, but I will go slower. In other words, their abject experience of their physicality and/or interiority. Some case material. Leah, age 27, presented with a disorder of the self, borderline spectrum, bulimia nervosa, self-cutting, and body dysmorphia. After about 4 years of analysis, Leah stopped being bulimic, and after about 7.5 years, she stopped cutting. Now, although these were extremely important changes, my focus here is on Leah's underlying struggle with self-hatred, which remained a powerful, constant aspect of her inner life long after her bulimia and cutting had ceased. Leah talked about going for drinks with colleagues after work on Friday. She felt fat and awkward and ugly. On Saturday, she'd struggled all day with feeling flat and hopeless. In the evening, she'd become increasingly restless. Then it went blurry. She lost track of time and had a sense that she got into a really dark space. It felt awful, like some kind of huge pressure was building up and up. Something had to give. She remembered being in the bathroom with that weird, numb, distant, but too connected feeling. She described feeling like she was outside herself, with watching Razor Girl make a number of cuts on her thighs. Leah didn't have words for what she felt when she saw the blood, but afterwards there was a sense of relief, of being able to be in herself again, but only for now. My comment to her, sounds like you got overwhelmed by a kind of pressure and started to break up, the blurry bit, and the dark space sounds like you felt like you were really on your own. She nods. Me. Remembering how you've talked about these places before, I guess you were in that combination of numbness and everything hurting too much at the same time. Leah, yeah. But I just want to stop doing it. We keep talking about this stuff, but I can't stop it and I'm desperate. So I say to Leah, look, my guess is that as we're talking, it's like there are two bits of you pulling in different directions. One bit's hugely distressed and feels ashamed and confused about the blurry, dark places it goes to, and she merges into Razor Girl. She cuts because she knows that that will break the pressure build-up and give you some relief. But I imagine another bit of you just wants the whole nightmare to stop, the whole cutting nightmare to stop. It wants me to stop talking with you about it and do something to make it stop now, forever. And then I'm kind of wondering inside myself whether Leah might need a bit more from me to help her manage the shame of us having this conversation at all. So I add, trouble is, I think both are bits of you, and I'm actually interested in what it's like to be each of those bits. I have a hunch, though this might sound a bit weird, that if you could get rid of the cutting bit, you'd lose something important. Leah tearing up, I hate her, I hate Razor Girl, I'm weird, sick, crazy, I hate being me, a stupid, fat, useless piece of shit. I just want it all to stop. So, maybe me saying I'm interested in what it's like to be both of it, bits of you makes it more painful, perhaps almost unbearably so. By now, Leah's crying, and she says, yes, it's like you want me to go to the dark place, and I just want to get rid of it. Me. Like my saying that I'm interested in both bits of you creates huge tension. The desperate bit wants the nightmare place and cutting to just stop, and the idea of me being interested in the cutting bit seems mad and cruel. If I tried to imagine what it's like to be the desperate bit, I'd be screaming at me, Sue, just do something to get rid of all this stuff now, please. But I'm also aware that Razor Girl has a whole world inside her. And painful as it is, I think it'd be wrong of me to get rid of her for you, even if I could. Leah's still crying, but I just want her to go away. Sue, would she go? Leah, very quietly. No, she's strong and she won't go. Sue, what about some middle ground? I know you really want rid of Razor Girl, but my hunch is that if we can slow stuff down enough and get to know a little bit about her world, that kind of compulsive can't not do it thing that happens with cutting might very slowly ease down a little bit. Like if we get to know Razor Girl a little, both she and you might find little bits of room to move or make choices about the massive pockets of pressure that build up. How about we try and imagine that you and I are sitting here together and Razor Girl's with us? I know she's there, or we know she's there, and so does she, but she's a bit of a way off and we can sit like this for as long as we need to. Leah cries for a while and says, yeah, okay. My sense is that her tone is of sadness, exhaustion, resignation. But there's also a bit of relief, maybe, that I'm prepared to stay in this field of tensions with her. The point that I'm trying to make here is that even at this point, some years into the work with Leah, I still don't know what Leah's self-hatred and cutting are about. I've got loads of ideas, but I don't know. But I can assume that they're multi-layered, complex communications, and I'm prepared to wait for as long as it takes and work as slowly as necessary for any clues about their possible meaning to emerge. And this is my attempt to apply what I talked about earlier as Jung's position of Socratic ignorance. Working in this way, Leah and I reached a point where the voice of her self-hatred began to lose some of its concrete, absolute authority. Leah was now a couple of years into a stormy but warm relationship with a man. When they were out together one weekend, Leah heard herself think, you know, it's a shame you aren't pretty. It would be so much nicer for him if you were. What stood out for her was the soft, kindly, comforting tone of this inner voice, as if it was trying to soothe an anxious child. And we were both curious about how different this was from her traditional berating self-hater voice. In the discussion that emerged, Leah was shocked to realise that this, the most comforting voice that she had ever noticed inside herself, was actually vicious. What emerged over the following year was that from as early as Leah could remember, she had experienced her father as a profoundly disappointed, alienated man. As we explored this, she recalled how, as a child, she had felt totally overwhelmed and helpless around him. After further reflection and a number of dreams, she began to develop a sense that she had tried to master these feelings by assuming that she was the source of her father's deep disappointment. What also emerged, what she also kind of pieced together, was that living herself through the prism of this internalisation of her father's unbearable loneliness and disappointment was the nearest and indeed only thing she had to love or relationship with him. At a deep level, she had to see herself through this prism. She had to hate herself accordingly and enact that self-hatred through bulimia and cutting if she was to have any sense of connection to him. I want to underline that the cutting and the bulimia and the self-hatred was love to Dad. It was loyalty, it was an attempt to draw close to him. It's the only one she had. To let that go was unbearable, unthinkable, and unsurvivable. Briefly, by way of a kind of one-paragraph conclusion, in this presentation I've been exploring how I used elements of Jung's early work in combination with Laplanche's ideas on analysis and the psyche to work with Leah. The common ground between these two theories is that they both locate the analyst's not knowing as central to the process of offering an analytic space in which the patient can come to glimpse something of the enigmas around which they are organised. These glimpses and the cracks that they reveal can lead to significant changes in the patient's experience of themselves and the world around them.